Good evening and welcome to TheDustyFeet. It's another Thursday night, and so we have another Dusty Feet. Yeah, pretty good, huh? Okay. So, let's remember that any updates that we're going to get go out on Twitter, especially the morning of course. And then DustyFeet.com for everything else. The menus across the top there you'll see, but that's where everything we're going to... everything we've done is there, and it's categorized at times by stuff, so it'll be nice too. Tonight, there's our clue. Homework series. We're on episode 8 of his multi-part series. I believe there's 37, so we have a ways to go. But I like how we break Matthew down in so many pieces, and in this it's brilliant. So tonight, episode 8, as you can see, it says part 1. It will be 2 parts, at least on this one, not like this 6 where I wasn't sure how far it was going to go. I've already edited and everything up, so there'll just be 2 parts, this one, and then in 2 weeks, we'll have the second part of this, okay? So Jesus, truth, and spin, interesting stuff. I think we'll enjoy it. So, and as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go on the Dusty Feet. So, as we've seen or listened to on other episodes, don't swear an oath. And you go, and he mentioned this in the clip. By the way, if you haven't listened to this episode yet from Mackie, and you're not watching it live, I suggest you pause this. The link is in the description. Go to that link, click on it, and watch the episode. I always want to make sure that I don't take anything of Mackie's out of context and that I don't misrepresent him in any way. And that happens to be particularly apropos for this evening and our topic that we're talking about. And you'll get it as we go in. Especially if you've listened to the video, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But don't swear an oath. So there's one point in the clip where he's like, whew, okay, I'm good. I got this one out with all the other chewings we've had with different things. I haven't sworn an oath, and so I think I'm fine, and I think we have challenges with that, and so just for fun, let's go ahead and read. Come on, why are you doing that? Here we go. So let's read. There's only Matthew 5:33 through 37. So let's give it a listen. It says again. You heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to God. I say to you, do not swear vainly at all, neither by the heaven, because it is Elohim's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great sovereign. Nor swear by your head, because you're not able to make one hair black or white, and let your yes be yes, and your no be no. And what goes beyond this is from the wicked one. Mackie's going to mention in there a lot of things, and one of the phrases that he uses, which I really enjoy, is glowing hyperlinks. Okay, so he mentions that this particular saying that he says isn't a saying. It's not from a verse, not a direct quote. It's actually a conglomeration of verses in this piece. And I'll say, for the point, it's not just verses. It's the stories that go to those verses. However, the verses for you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to God. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12, Numbers chapter 30, verse 2, and Deuteronomy 23, verse 21. Okay? So in those, I suggest that you go back and listen to the stories on those. The reason being, that's what the people there heard. They're being told this story, and they were only told scripture. They didn't have Bibles, right? We already talked about this. They didn't have Bibles. They didn't have these things. So it was the stories that they'd been told. And they're going to go, wait. I've heard this before. And he's going to nod and say, now you're getting it, right? And in those discussions, the thing that we don't have on this is the, you don't get the after discussion. You don't get the chatting with the rabbi afterwards on questions they have. It wasn't like he just got up, preached, and then walked away, and not like some Baptist revival preacher. He actually there entertained questions, do this. We just don't have a lot of that recorded, not a lot of it anyways. It says, as a matter of fact, where it says, but I say to you, do not swear vainly at all. Vainly is actually part of the Shem Tov excerpts for the Hebrew word Shah. So that's interesting. Nor by earth for its footstool. That's Isaiah 66:1. And by Jerusalem for it's the city of the great sovereign. Psalms 48:2. So there's a lot of glaring hyperlinks in here that are tying you to things that Jesus, that Yeshua is bringing together. And that's part of what we see when we get to these. And I think that's an interesting thing to kind of chew on. Okay. We're at this point, and we've already talked about it. We're getting there on where this is a terminology that me personally, I'm more comfortable with. And that's where, because they talk about, the law, right? From a Christianity standpoint, the law was so hard they couldn't do it. So Jesus made it easier, and then he raised the bar. And none of that sits well with me, nor does it sit scripturally well. Okay? But we've talked about that that it's a move of maturity. We're moving up in maturity. The old, you've heard it said of old, right? In other words, you've been doing this for a while. We need to be more mature. Paul takes it that way, right? He talks about that as well. Look, it's time to step up and be mature. Get past the childish stuff. Move on, okay? And part of this is how this is approached, how you're looking at these things. And so the pullout is, you've heard this, and you're wrapped up in not saying something or not doing something. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I didn't lie. And you realize that there's more to it than that. And so he said, okay, you're more mature. Let's go there. And we'll talk about that. So let's start the first clip from Mackie. We're going to have two of them tonight. So let's start the first clip and take a listen.
So we're in this section. It's kind of a mini section within chapters 5 through 7, where Jesus is filling out a portrait of the renewed hearts and minds of the people of the kingdom, the people who commit to Jesus and allow him to begin remaking them. What does such a person look like? And what he says is such a person looks like somebody who fulfills what all of the Old Testament laws and story were pointing to all along. And so we're in kind of the 6-part little mini-series here where Jesus quotes from an Old Testament law, and then he says, you've heard that, and that is good. And then he sets his own teaching right alongside it. And his own teaching doesn't contradict it, but it is meant to get to the real root issues. And so every single week, it's been a really intense part of the series, because he's getting at these deep root issues that distort our relationships. Absolute highest value and the highest ethic of the kingdom. We're gonna hear this so many times, right? As we go on in the series, Jesus is asked, what does it mean to be a human? What is God's will for human beings? And Jesus summarizes the great command with two Two angles. And what's the first one? Love God, all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And what's the second ethic of the kingdom? Loving your neighbor as yourself. And so everything in the kingdom is about God remaking his world and remaking humans to be a world of healthy, whole, loving relationships, of us with God and us with each other. And so what Jesus is moving towards in these 6 parts is exposing among his disciples the deep root issues in us that distort and that corrode our relationships. The highest value is loving relationships. And so he goes right to the deep issues that sabotage our relationships. And so he's talked about anger and unforgiveness and sex and all this kind of thing. Today he's talking about the way that we bend and distort reality in order to control how people perceive us. And I just want to begin with an image, actually. It's an image that I came across recently that for me actually has been very helpful in kind of helping me. I don't know about you. I feel like I would just get punched in the gut just in preparing these messages. I don't know what you feel like receiving them. But this is another week of just okay, here's another grenade in the room. Just throw that one in. So, but I came across an image recently that's helped me, kind of reminded me of what I think Jesus is really, really getting at here. And how many of you are National Geographic fans or subscribers? Yeah, you see it at the dentist's office, and you're like, sweet. That's kind of how it is with me, or the doctor's office, and you're like, oh, cool, I don't, whatever. And so I remember, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but I was sitting at the dentist, and I remember I came across an issue, and it had one of these big photojournal essays about icebergs in the Arctic Ocean. And it was all these amazing, amazing photographs of both just how cool they look and how unique their shapes are, but then also of these underwater photographs of the parts of icebergs that you don't see from the surface. Do you guys know about these photos? Have you seen them before? They're so amazing. So one of the photographers I remember from that story was a guy named Paul Suiters. And if you go to his website, he's continued to explore iceberg photography. I don't know if it's a thing, I guess, but he's amazing at it. And so just here are some images from his website, paulsuiters.com. You should go look at it. It's amazing. How thick was his wetsuit? You know what I mean? To get in the water and to take these pictures. And what's so remarkable and striking about these pictures, of course, is that what you see you're in a boat, and you're watching, you look at an iceberg, and it might be flat, and it's just a big flat sheet of ice. It might be, 15, 20 feet high with all these, protrusions or whatever. It might be an actual small mountain, 100 feet high or whatever. But what these photographs show us is that what the relationship between what's above the surface and what's underneath the surface, you can just never predict by what you see above water. And so some of these things, they're just 20 feet high, but 100 feet deep under the water, and just tens of thousands of metric tons of ice and glacier break off and stuff like that. They're amazing. And I think why I find these photos inspiring, there's lots of different ways. They're just cool and geeky if you like nature photography or something. But there's something profound, because really what is that photograph about? It's about perception. And it's about the fact that if you were to view this thing from above water, you would have no clue what's under the surface. And I saw this image it was on some advertisement or something recently, and then I wasted half an hour on Paul Suiter's website. You know how those things go when you're trying to do something, and then all of a sudden, you guys know what I'm talking about? Anyway, but God bless Paul Suiters, because he takes amazing photographs. It was a wonderful half hour spent. So, but you guys can see where I'm going here. I think this is it's a helpful image that to me really helped me grab onto what Jesus is trying to do in this section of the good news, the teaching about the good news of the kingdom. And it's a theme that'll come up many times as we go through Matthew in his teachings. Jesus views the human beings, we have all this surface behavior that we watch each other do. And we're going through day-to-day life and working with people and living with people and so on, and then sometimes we crash into each other. And there's all this activity that we can observe, and whether it's the kind of stuff he's highlighting, the short temper or the bitterness or sexual misbehavior or broken relationships or distorting the truth and so on. And so that's the stuff we observe about each other. And maybe for some of us, it's more under the radar. We don't notice. People don't notice that we're doing that kind of stuff. For some of us, it's just out there for everybody to see. It's just that's some people's lot in life. And so what Jesus is interested in is not simply behavior modification in the community of his people. What he really wants to do is move towards the root causes that result in those surface behaviors. And that's what he's been doing as we go through these 6 parts, and that's what he's doing this week. What is it that causes us to bend and distort how we talk about ourselves in front of other people? We actually are trying to hide from each other by how we talk about ourselves and manage other people's perception of us. What's the root issue? We call it lying and don't lie, and you teach your kids don't lie, and you write bad moralistic children's books about don't lie, and that kind of thing. But what's actually going on underneath the surface? And it seems to me that's where Jesus is trying to go. So lock that image in your mind, and I think it'll help us explore what Jesus is talking about.
What Jesus is talking about. So there's a bunch here, and I want to start out with something before we get to the point. I want us to start stretching our thoughts a little bit. I want us to start to kind of think about something maybe a little different than you thought for. Or in this particular one, does that really matter? Did that really matter? Can that really matter? One of those kind of pieces. I love the root issues that distort our relationships, and that's what we've been studying in all this up to this point. Lust, anger, all these are root issues that destroy relationships both vertically and horizontally. Okay, and it's that relationship destruction that's the damage. The not lying or not committing adultery is behavior. So is behavior modification, but that's like a little kid. Okay, so let's go there with that. So from a child's perspective, it might be seen as obeying the rules, doing what you're told. I told you to do this is what you do when they're in the house. When you have a kid and when they're little, like you won't even let them, they can't be in a different room. They have to be in the same room. People that have their kids sleep with them in their bedrooms, they're like, they always have to be their kids. Eventually they graduate to having a room over there, and now we have baby monitors so people can at least actually know what's going on in that room, even though they're not in that room. Although for how many thousands of years people weren't in that room. But let's just go there with that. So, and then that boundary starts to grow. Then they can go play in the room while you're not there, as long as you know, until, like parents, when it gets too quiet, then you want to know what they're doing, right? These are these boys, right? And then they can run around the house, and they can go in the backyard with a fence, right? And they can go play in the backyard, stay in the yard. Then they can go in a yard that's not fenced, say the front yard, and then they can eventually start going down the street, and the boundaries expand. Have we prepared them for all of these as we go? What I'm going to say might irritate people. And what I want you to do is think through the thought process, not the actual, if you choose to do it, that's fine. And I'm not there to not going to do it. I'm just bringing up these as thought processes to think about, okay? Growing up as a kid, I grew up with the no seatbelts, back of a station wagon, back of a pickup truck, no elbow pads and helmets and falling off of things and dirt, rub some dirt in it and go play, and drinking out of the water hose and all that stuff. And that's where I grew up, okay? But with that came some other things. When your parents are there and they're telling you, like, for instance, what's hot, okay? You can either block off the kitchen, they can't go in the kitchen, and you'll tell them things are hot, but they'll never experience it until they realize what's going to get. You can go a long way between burning yourself or maiming yourself to understand things are hot. Okay, and you can get there. And how do you teach that happens? A wall socket. Don't stick the paperclip in the wall socket, right? One of those things, and you want to do. So people put plastic plugs in all their wall sockets, so it can never happen. And I get that, But have we learned the, have we really learned what that means? Or we just behavior notification, I'm going to put up a fence so that it doesn't happen. And then when you get to the point where you wonder what's going to happen, then so you can figure out why you get shocked when you take off a wall plate, go look at something you do, and you stick your screwdriver in there, boom, you get bounced. And didn't know, oh, that's hot. Okay. I remember giving my brother Jimmy the paper clip to stick in the wall socket as a kid. That's not good. And so, James, I will again apologize for doing that. However, it gets it. Mom said don't do it and don't do it. Oh, here's the paperclip. I didn't do it, but I saw what happened to do it. Just one of those crazy things. But are we teaching kids? Are we dealing with root behavior early enough? And I don't know what that means. That can be very challenging, and we're going to see how this walks through. It takes a village to raise a child. Remember that? It really does in the community. You can't do that on your own, just in your house. Do that stuff. You need in that community. We're not even going to address schooling, education, and all of that stuff. We'll talk about that on another episode sometime, or maybe on another discussion with some guests or something. We can talk about that. But so now let's visit something a little practical on teaching kids behavior, okay, and how this goes. And this is the love your neighbor as yourself thing. So let's go on the horizontal relationship and go. And we know that that's how much do you care for the other person as much as you care for yourself, and that's a selfish love. So how do you do that the other way? And that's an interesting thought. And this is what came to me. Okay, was in our culture, birthday parties, you go get a gift for them. Your other cultures, they buy gifts for the guests. Different culture, different deal. But I'll say that the majority of our culture plays along where you go buy the gift and bring it to them. Okay, so you take your kid, because you're going to their friend's birthday party, and you take them to Toys R Us or Target, Walmart, something, right? You're going to go look for a gift. And so they go looking for a gift. But are they looking for a gift that they want, or looking for a gift that Billy or Sally wants? 9 times out of 10, it's what they want. How do you teach that? I don't know. There's a lot of discussion that goes with that. How do you get them to think about what do they want? But what happens is they pick a gift that they like, and then when they go to the party, they want them to open up their gift so they can play with them and you can play with it at the party, right? That's how selfish that thought process can be. And that is at such a young age. Where are we missing the opportunities to teach these things so early in life? And then we have to unlearn it later on. And it causes such a challenge. Icebergs, when he mentions the iceberg thing, and he pulls these, and you go, well, this is the point, and this is how you do, and you realize the baggage that's underneath it. And oh my gosh, the baggage that comes with that. Your thought process is what people see you talk about is this big, right? This little floaty thing up there. And then all of this down here is what brought you, I know, using the iceberg, floats you to that spot. That's why you're there. And all of that baggage that's underneath, this is supporting why you do what you do at the top, okay? And our need to unlearn some things, and at such a innocuous level where really does it matter. So he talks about lying, right? Remember that? He said, don't lie, don't do this, and this is bad lie, da-da-da-da. And we go, generally speaking, that's not what he's talking about here, but let's just visit that just for fun. The lying. And you go, well, how do we deal with that? So let me throw something that we as parents did and do, and it causes challenges in we're setting kids up to already start with it's okay, but, right? Which already introduces a challenge to it. And again, it's going to irritate people. So just be prepared. So let's go to Christmas. Okay? And you go to Christmas, and you got Santa Claus and all the stuff that goes with that, right? And the specials and the stories and yada, yada, and you get this. And so kids grow up with this Santa Claus. And then eventually they learn it's a lie. We have nice little words for it, call it a white lie. We do this as we transition from a lie to truth, and then even then that gets convoluted. So we've already made it this important thing, this big event, all that's tied to it, and all the buildup that goes with it, and we've already set ourselves up for, but lying works when you're happy, and lying works when it's okay, and lying works when it has this, and then you turn around and say later it doesn't, and then you can't figure out why relationships are twisted, and you go, but that can't be related to Christmas and Santa and all that stuff, and I don't agree. I think its root cause takes us to those very beginning foundational teachings that we have to unlearn, and they corrupt our relationships. And that's hard to think about. And what do we do when that foundation's already been laid, and now we have to live with all that underwater surface stuff, and then why people do what they do at the top, right? And that's hard. I know, and I made those mistakes as a parent. Oh my gosh, if I could go back and do it all again and with my kids, I guarantee you I would do it differently. There's a lot of my life that I'm okay with the mistakes I made in those kind of deals, and that's fine that when those fall on me. But those foundational things that I missed with my kids, I would go back and shift those foundational, if I could. The hard part is I'm asking that of a 19, 20-year-old, right? And are they capable of doing that? But I'll go back and say, how far back do we start learning those things? And how do we prepare our kids to be the parents for their kids, right? And those are hard, like he says, gut punch setups as they get this, because they really force us to look at ourselves and the things that destroy and subvert our relationships, horizontally and vertically. Okay, and how do we do that? So I haven't sworn an oath recently. Let's listen to clip 2, and we'll see how this plays out.
Let's look at Jesus' words right here, this paragraph in verses 33 through 37. This might be the first week so far in the series where you read the paragraph and you were kind of like, phew, I don't remember the last time I swore an oath, so I'm good on this one. You know what I mean? At least there's one area where I think I'm following Jesus pretty well, because I just don't, I mean, maybe if you were on a jury or something, you swore, This isn't something we do a lot. But it was something that was very common and significant in Jesus' day. But even the examples that he gives are just surface phenomenon. And with that last line, he moves to the deeper issue, because this is about a truthful, honest presentation of ourselves to other people. And why don't we do that more often? So he does what he quotes some kind of Old Testament law, as he's always done. In verse 33, you've heard it said, "Don't break your oaths, but fulfill to the Lord the oaths that you have vowed." Here's something that's interesting. He's not actually quoting any one law or verse or passage from the Old Testament. He's actually using language from a handful of different passages in the Old Testament about this practice of swearing oaths and so on. And so let's kind of paint a scenario, like what is Jesus speaking into here? What kind of practice is he addressing? So let's say you're a Jewish farmer, right? And you live outside of Jerusalem and you have a big grove of olive trees or something like that. Jewish farmer. And you've got a neighbor who's also a Jewish olive farmer or whatever. And let's say for one reason or another, your neighbor doesn't like you. He hates your guts or whatever. Your olives are always better. You stuff them with pimentos and you make loads of money during Passover on your olives or something like that. So he's like jealous of you, and it's been a difficult relationship for a long time. So your neighbor has donkeys. Just work with me here, all right? So your neighbor has donkeys, and one of his hardest working donkeys turns up missing. And, he hates you, and so, he thinks that for sure you did it to maybe work your olive harvest or whatever. So he goes to the local elders, and he makes an accusation against you. My neighbor, he stole my donkey. I know he stole my donkey. In fact, I saw him do it. And then maybe he'll hype up the rhetoric even more, and he'll say, I'm telling you the truth, local elders. I saw him steal the donkey. I swear to you. I swear by the name of Yahweh and everything that's holy in Jerusalem that I saw him steal the donkey. Okay, you guys with me? Now, so what's in this silly little story, what's happening right there? Why does this neighbor feel the need to say that? Why couldn't he just say, I saw him do it, or I think he did it, Let's investigate. But he appeals to God, right? He drags God into it. And he uses God's name to do what? What's he doing? So he's using God's name to somehow, by association, God is good and holy and truthful. And so somehow that makes the claim more important, more serious. You need to take me more seriously, and so I'm going to use something like God and bolster my claim that I think whatever. That's what he's having. Why does he do that? Is he just power hungry? Is he just a jerk or whatever? You don't know. He's just your crabby neighbor, And so the elders investigate. And it turns out that, you didn't take the donkey. His cousin came and borrowed the donkey for a driveway project or something, and he forgot to tell him, and he thought it was you, and it's all just a ruse or whatever. Okay. So what's happened now? In public, your neighbor has taken the name of God and has associated it with his own insecurity and crookedness and whack sense of reality, and he has taken the name of Yahweh in vain, and so defiling it by swearing this oath. And so there developed, or they were given laws to the people of Israel to avoid and regulate this kind of thing, to stop it from happening. So some famous verses from the Bible. One of the 10 Commandments, in fact, in Exodus chapter 20. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Or in older English translations, you might be familiar with the wording of it, which is, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God, what? In vain, right? What does that mean? Leviticus 19, you shall not swear falsely by my name and so defile the name of your God. So in our culture now, swearing has to do with foul language and then using God or Jesus' name in foul language or something like that. That's not what swearing is in the Bible. Swearing is doing what the neighbor did. It's swearing this oath to somehow bolster the importance of a claim that you're making. And the whole point is to take God's name in vain, is to take God's holiness and uniqueness and goodness and associate it with your own, whatever, distortion of the truth and crookedness and so on. And so what happens when God's name gets associated with my crookedness? It defiles it. It's an abuse of God's reputation. And so you have these laws given in ancient Israel. Don't use the name of God in your oath.
Don't lose the name of God in your oath. And it's that, because part of it was I just won't swear by God, I'll swear by something else, and da-da-da. Or, the yes be yes, the no be no. But we're getting more to the root cause scenario. We're going to get into the second part of this video in the next episode there's 2 more parts that we want to play on that. So, but I want us to take a look at where we do this, and remember that we do this regularly. And sometimes we don't even think about it when we do. But we like to bolster what we say by saying, what I say has more credibility than what you say. Okay? Or you should hold mine more weighty than that because, and then the phrases that, of course, we don't want to talk about. Things like, I swear to God, the God's honest truth. Or we won't say that, so we'll go, on my parents' life, on my parents' grave, on my firstborns, where we're trying to add importance, weight, credibility. We do this. And we don't think sometimes when we do it as often as we do it, but we'll throw it out in questions. When we have the inference, you're talking to somebody and you're asking the question, and I've heard it in conversations, and then this conversation said, so what school did you go to? Okay, so we're already asking the question, what it's going to do is, does your school going to meet a high enough of a standard in my head that's going to add credibility to what you're saying? What school did you go to? What seminary did you go to? There's a bunch. Which one do you want? Oral Roberts, Logos, Biola. There's a lot, and you walk through them and you go, so which one? So the preacher that has more credibility is because he went to a certain seminary, or a doctor, right? We see sometimes, we go into the doctor's office, and every once in a while we'll see their plaque on the wall, and you go, oh, that's interesting. And then you'll see they went to, whatever school they went to, and every once in a while you'll see somebody say they went from Harvard or something, and so we look at those and we go, ooh, there must be something to that, for that. What's really funny is from that undercore piece, we don't bother to ask the question, so where did you graduate in your class? If you're asking those kind of questions or thoughts, yes, what kind of grades did you get? At least I know whether I got a C student, or a top of his class specialist or something. I don't know. But in these points, we're looking for credibility. I went to here. I studied under this. I studied under this. And this is where a lot of those Pharisaical challenges became, is they were fighting for who did they study under. And there was a constant fight for this. Paul addresses it down the road too, doesn't he? Yes. And the church, and then in that, I was this. He said, you're not getting the point. And this is where the root, that undercore cause here is, you're misrepresenting, you're either moving yourself up or down, or misrepresenting yourself. And so we do it two ways. We either talk about ourselves higher, and we do, and we do this, or we say, whatever, or we will talk down the other person. I'll find a way, instead of me moving up, I will discredit you. So I'm going to find a way to not honor you. Okay? So it's like the flip side of the oath. It's the other side, is that I'm going to take my lack of credibility or whatever, and I'm going to abuse you on that side. And that's hard. And we see that all the time. Where do we see it most? Politics. I would say probably the largest setup. News, maybe the other way. And so it's a constant battle with this, on this. And our world plays that game. It plays that game. And it leaks over to us, and it leaks over to our social media posts, and it leaks over where I'm the guy I'm quoting has more credibility than the guy that you're quoting. So we're already up in the ante on what we do. And that really, really, really sullies the name of so many things. The fact that we even use the Bible to swear on in a courtroom has so sullied that name, the damage it's been done, because somebody will say that and then, one, not care. In other words, I'm asking you, the person, to swear on somebody that they don't care about. They don't care about God. They don't care about his reputation. They don't care. So, sure, I'll throw him under the bus. I don't care. Okay? And we brought that in, and we say, but if you do this, then you must hold the same reverence that I do when you do this. And you go, no, they don't. And then here's another flip side that that causes problems when we talk about, and we're gonna get there. Well, okay, let's go here. So from a defiles God's reputation. When a cop, so let's think of it this way from a community standpoint, okay? When a cop goes rogue, right? Heather and I like to watch British crime shows. It's just our thing, because they're messy. They don't end clean. They're convoluted. They run twists that don't hit American shows. But in this one particular show, we like they're after they're the unit that goes after bad cops. They call them bent coppers, right? The bent coppers. And so they have to, their integrity level should be way up here, okay? What you learn in the show is that their integrity level on the surface is maybe up here, right? But underneath, there's still that, what can I get away with because I understand the system, and how can I get away with part of that underneath? Okay? But in that, then we find a bent copper. We don't, the person that turns, they are the bad deal. However, they sully the reputation of the community. They sully the reputation of the community when they do it. They mess up being cops. And then people all of a sudden, why should we trust cops? Okay? That's a problem. That's a big problem. They swore to protect and serve. Did they do that? That's a challenge. And what it does to affect the community. Okay, so there's the obvious one. So let's say that you, as a person, belongs to a community. You belong to a community either maybe in your neighborhood, maybe in the church you go to, the group you hang out with, those kind of deals. And there's a community that's there, okay? It's interesting when there's some serial killer is found on some neighborhood, and they go, he was such a nice boy. I didn't have any problem with him at all. He helped me with my groceries. He did all that stuff, because he's putting a false pretense on, which, again, we're going to get in the later episodes. We'll be talking about that. But in this false pretense, they're always surprised that then the neighborhood tanks. It's fine until then, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to move into the neighborhood because that house had 17 bodies in the floorboard. Okay? Now you take that and you take that to your community and your church. And then you, or I, meaning us, we misbehave. We sully the name of God, the reputation of God. We do something that isn't, that brings his name and the community's name into disrepute, right? We do this. But we don't think about the damage it's doing to the community. We really don't think about it. I want to be careful how I say this. Bumper stickers. I'm not a big fan of bumper stickers, but that's fine. But you put the Jesus bumper sticker, I'm a Jesus follower, yada, 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 yada. And then the cops pull you over for speeding. So people drive by, big flashing blues, cops got his lights on, and there's your Jesus bumper sticker. See, you're no different than me. You speed like I do. You break the rules too. Yeah. So then our community gets sullied. That's uncomfortable to think about. It's uncomfortable to... It really is, because when you think about what do you do that can affect your community, and there's a lot, especially if you're vocal about your community, especially if you're the one that's waving the banner, you know, that it's that. And what happens when we have the preacher that falls, right? And they're up there preaching hellfire and brimstone and all that kind of stuff, yada, 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 yada. And then next thing you know, he's sleeping with the secretary. And all of that crumbles. And you bring God into disrepute. You haven't just sullied yourself like a bad cop. You haven't just sullied yourself. You've damaged the reputation of the community, of the authority you represent, the authority that we represent in God. And how do we act accordingly to represent that? And how do we do that? And I don't have to tell you, meaning it's not my job to tell you how to defend God's reputation. Maybe it's more about me looking at myself and saying, what do I need to do to make sure that my behavior doesn't sully the reputation of the God I follow? Because eventually, if I'm a light, if I'm that light in the darkness, if I'm salt to the earth, right? I'm salt to that those do get watched more than we know, more than we're sometimes comfortable with. But how do we do that? And do that on a day-to-day basis? And how do we do that and not and do that in love? Okay? So I get I didn't commit adultery, I didn't murder anybody, I didn't do this. However, he says, look, that core issue of lust that gets down in the craw, that next thing you know, festers into something else, and it drives us somewhere, okay? And hate, that anger, that deep-rooted core of you have no value, that you're worthless to me, that I don't care about you, so I act a certain way. We know that our God cared so much that he didn't care about what you do, that he still sent his son, right? How does that work for us in what we do? We like being the recipient of that. Oh, heck yeah. We love being the recipient of that. Woohoo! And that old churchy thing that says, okay, now I got my Willy Wonka chocolate factory golden ticket, right? And yet, are we sullying the name of our Creator and our God when we live the way we do, and we defile him in front of others? And then we wonder why the world looks at the church this way. God on our side. God's on our side. Okay? World War II, there were literally banners on both sides. Well, it's hung it on Hitler's side. If he'd have won, the victor goes the history, right? The victor goes the story. If we'd all speak in German now or something, God's on his side, whether he is or isn't. That's what gets said, right? The same thing on this side. And well, we won, so God must be on our side. Again, I'm not uberly convinced either way on that. On that side's on a war and maiming and abuse and death scenario. That's an interesting challenge. But the fact that you claim it is a problem. That we use that to defend our position, and I tell you, God's on my side. We'll get there eventually. Next week, we'll be talking a little bit about, for us in our church community, when we say that God told me, or I feel led, or I have a peace. We're going to get into that. And when that, at times, is a defense to block up, to not relate, to shut down conversation, to do those kind of things. So that accountability is, we erase our accountability of things. All of this, especially this, where we're painting a different picture, we're misrepresenting who we are. We're misrepresenting. And in a courtroom where you're swearing it, and your truth, you're giving your testimony, you're swearing on this because what's going to follow. The reason you say that oath is because what's going to follow is supposed to be, to the best of your knowledge, this is what you know, or this is what happened, right? And we don't think about that outside. You'd almost think about, maybe we should think about, I just thought about this just now. What if we took this for everyday talk every day? Meaning that we got up and in our morning prayer said, God, yet let my yes be yes, yet my no be no. Let the words that leave me represent you truthfully and represent me truthfully. And let me represent my community truthfully. And then what leaves your mouth should be only that. In other words, I don't have to speak about somebody else's mistruth. I need to speak about my truth and his truth, God's truth. And how do we do that? And how do we do? I already know now. I'll fess up. First one to tell you, when I get pulled over again, meaning I'm 60, I've been pulled over before for stuff. I get pulled over again for speeding or my California stops or something like that, right? To turn and argue with the cop is just stupid. To say, it's about time, maybe, that those other times that I don't, maybe that's why I don't put a bumper sticker on my car. Because I don't want to, the guy go over, I got one of them Jesus guys that likes to drive it, 20 miles over the speed limit, and that's a challenge. And we don't realize, like we've talked about before, the ripple effect we have on what we do going forward. That point with Abel, when he's murdered by Cain, blood's on the ground, and God says, the blood of your brother cries out to me. Okay, from the dust. Okay, in the Hebrew, it's not blood, it's bloods, because it's the entire generation, the entire lineage. Everything that was to come from Abel is gone. Everything is gone. Okay? And we think, wow, that's drastic, that's dramatic, that's big. And I go, okay. Can you take that thought? Can you take that thought and think what you're doing has that same effect going forward, except it doesn't stop. It grows and it goes. And you add to it. And when you're looking for people and you go, how many bad things and and the cop comes back and he says, I pulled over 6 people today and 4 of them had Jesus stickers on them. Those Jesus people, they are so hypocritical. because they talk about being good and love everything and that kind of stuff, but they have disregard for the law. They have disregard for the safety of others. They don't really love people. It's only convenient. And you go, do I want to be part of that conversation? Do I want my God to be brought up in that conversation? And do I want to be a part by being one of those 4, scenarios? And those are hard questions. Those are gut punch questions to us, because it asks us in our lives, what do we think about what we do every day? And the anger that spews from our mouths as we don't like somebody or what somebody's saying. So I'm going to be angry, and I think it's a justified anger. And I go, I'm not sure about that. But I do know that the reputation goes back to say, look at those spiteful, hateful, rude church people. And then that defensive, well, I'm just speaking the truth, that God said this and this. I don't see it. I think that's a challenge. I don't see it that way. I think there's a very bold, scary challenge in that. And all we have to do, it's really not hard. You just have to look at the life of Yeshua. Look at the life of Jesus. And you have challenges with that. The interesting part when we read what we read, and one of those fun things about Midrash, Skip Moen talks about this, Mackie even alludes to it on some stuff, which is fun, is when you're doing the Midrash, when you're discussing something in a story, you're looking at a biblical deal, to sit back and maybe think about what was the emotion going on at the time. What really was going on emotionally at that moment. I'll give you one we don't think about often. And I love where Skip Moen has a deal where he talks about, I don't think the relationship ever was repaired past this point, was when Abraham and Isaac was going to sacrifice his son. We have a story, a flannel graph story. And you go, but what was going on at the moment that happens? And how distraught would you be as a person? You wouldn't go, oh, God didn't kill me today. I'm all good. Not that my dad tied me up, put me on an altar, and what's the emotional deal? And that affects everything for the rest of Isaac's life. And, might argue, his son and their sons. Okay? And I think the same thing with us is that if we have the life that continues, those things that we do, those things that happen, those things and how we respond to them is and does affect us down the road. Don't swear an oath. Let your yes be yes, yet your no be no. And I think in that, it's just, can I honestly portray myself and my God to the world in love? And how do I do that? This is what we've been talking about. This is what's messy, because that's not an easy answer. That opens up a whole bunch of questions, more and more questions. But those are mature thoughts. That's taking us past the don't. It's taking me past the don't, to have a healthy respect for electricity, and knowing that if you're an electrician, they're fully aware of the consequences of electricity, and they know how to insulate themselves and turn off power and do those things. Why? They have a healthy respect for the authority, the power that it has. And I think if we had a healthy respect and authority for the power that we represent when we say we're who we are, whatever title you choose to use as a God follower, right? The authority that you represent when your yes is yes and your no is no and your life is what you do, that's hard. And if we looked every day and said, I got up in the morning and said, hey, let what I do today not bring sullied reputation on God and my community. And then maybe not myself. Yeah. And we do that. So, the links to the videos, the Mackie video again is in the description for the vid. Updates on Twitter, Facebook. TheDustyFeet.com has. We'll have this episode and all the other episodes after it, and we'll talk about that next week. We have a Follow the Red String. Jim Warren's back on board. I love having my brother. I absolutely love having my brother. He challenges me. He makes me think, and I love our banter and our discussion. So it always excites me when I get to have him on. The week after that will be part 2 of this one, and we'll get into more of where that takes us and the challenges it brings and some more things to reflect on for ourselves. So next week, Follow Red String, Jim Warren, same bad time, same bad channel, and thanks for hanging with us tonight on The Dusty Feet.